Hey there, welcome back. Welcome to industrialization history lecture in a short micro. I'm going to try and keep it to about 20 minutes. Let's see if I can do that. American industrialization. Oh yeah, so 1890, the America passes the United Kingdom as the in global exports for the first time. America is the #1 trading nation. And how does that happen? Why does that happen? A former colony of England so quickly dominates, and it's the story of the hyper-industrialization in what is known as the second industrial revolution. I mean, industrialization is what's happening now, not the industrial revolution. The industrial revolution is England, 1760s, which takes hold there for kind of the same reasons that the second industrial revolution takes hold in America. But England has had industrialization from England spread to the continent, and then comes to America and other parts of the Western world. So industrial revolution is a unique time and place. Industrialization is what follows, and it's still happening in certain areas of the world to this day. But in any case, the second industrial revolution is this time period of the late 19th century, which America utterly dominates, its takeoff point. Okay, so let's get into that today and look at why that happens. Okay, and we can get a great sense of what is happening by just looking at the railroad building in America in the years during the Gilded Age, in the post-Civil War years up until 1900 to the 20th century. So here we have this map showing the first few railroads branching out from the coast there in 1830 in Massachusetts. Boston to New York was one of the first. Then in 1840, they're growing a bit there, 1850, and here we are by 1860, so on the eve of the Civil War. Fairly extensive network in the East. But look what happens as we jump to 1890. Okay, so by this point, the U.S. has 167,000 miles, or 270,000 kilometers of track by that point, 1890, more than anywhere else in the world. Almost half of that is west of the Mississippi, where at the same time the population of the Trans-Mississippi West increases fourfold. Now this really matters, not just at an economic level, but not just as evidence of what is happening in the United States, but also at a profoundly psychological level or intellectual level, because at this point in time, late 19th century, your progress really is measured by miles of track laid. This is how people of the Victorian era think. Progress is really measured by miles of track laid. That's the #1 indicator of a country's, where they are at in terms of industrialization, and America is where it is at for sure. Okay, and partly it's just getting going. Okay, so steam will give way to oil, and part of America's growth and why the 20th century is the American century is the discovery of mass reserves of oil right on the eve of the 20th century. Now, we shouldn't exaggerate that or the importance of that at that point, because coal is still dominant. Okay, so we're slowly transitioning to oil, and it'll be actually kind of interesting that it's in transportation, the first to switch over from steam and coal engines is global ocean transport, which often is taking oil from the Sun Belt to the Pennsylvania refineries in the early days. So the Lucas Gusher is the very first big oil strike in America. This is 1901. It is on the Salt Dome on the coast of Texas, and it's called the Beaumont Gusher. There's a whole interesting story behind it. Patillo Higgins, and who was this chemist who was sure it was down there, and went through a lot of different investors before he finally did strike oil, and it came out at 100,000 barrels a day, which is more than the output of all the Pennsylvania oil fields put together at that point. So oil is a big one as well going forward, but not so much in the Gilded Age era. So getting ahead of ourselves there. But it does point to another important thing, which is the importance of natural resources in explaining America's rise at this time. There's a Spindletop field in Beaumont, Texas, a couple of years after the Lucas Gusher. In an era of very different regulation. What we had was horizontal drilling, where your competitor would set up right next to you and drill into that same oil patch that's under your gusher. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing, and but again, this is about the switch to motorization and much of where the 20th century is at. Let's get back to the 19th century. But yeah, if you're at all into this, read the story, Spindletop Unwound. It's fascinating stuff. Alrighty. Okay, so why does the U.S. Take off? Well, it's a few reasons, and as an armchair quarterback, we go backwards and we try and identify those which really stand out, which is sometimes a bit of a fixed game. But in any case, these are empirically true that America was rich in natural resources is one, and you need that. Abundant in everything that mattered, really. America had plenty of coal throughout the country, iron ore as well, and in close proximity, and that matters because iron ore is needed for steel production. And it's not a given that you will have iron ore. The UK did as well, which explains its industrial revolution. Iron ore and coal in close proximity. France did not, which can help explain its late transition to industrialization. Plenty of lumber as well in America, and plenty of minerals. Gold, since 1849, California gold rush, supply of global gold has skyrocketed because of what is found in America. Silver, with the first Nevada silver strikes, the Comstock lode there. Copper and lead, all these are being mined, and they've been mined for decades in the U.S., and there's plenty of them. And they're a real catalyst because you need these raw materials and you need these energy sources. So these states does not need a colonial empire to secure these. Okay? Affluence is another one. The U.S. economy, its real GDP is massive, and it passes that of India in 1879. Now the thing is, the U.S. has 50 million people in 1879. India has 254 million. So it's going gangbusters, and passing China as well, which has even more people than India. The U.S. is the richest nation in the world in this era as measured in GDP per capita. Closest second is in Europe, and in France and Germany combined in 1870, the GDP per capita, gross domestic product per person, is $1,886. In the States at that point, it's $2,500. But that gap is widening. By 1900, it's 3,600 in France and Germany, and now in the States we're up to 5,300. So affluence, there's more capital for investment. Finally, most importantly, in my humble opinion, well, ideas matter a lot, and we'll get into the class reality and how that plays a factor in, and expectations, Americans having an attitude towards. Yeah, towards that the idea of the self-made man and the immigrant ideal certainly is a very powerful thing, which we can't quantify. But when I say most important, in my opinion, of these four is the fact that in the States we have a massive lead on mass production, and basically the Americans invent the mass production of complex goods. Right? Americans had invented that process, and the British recognized that. Even though Britain really initiated mass production of textiles and plateware, dinnerware, these kind of things, these kind of simple products that can be made in mass numbers. That happens in England for the first time in the Midlands in the Industrial Revolution. But it's America that first perfects how to mass produce complex products that have interchangeable parts, and they can be produced in different places around the nation, or really around the world, to standard, right? Standardization. America has solved the riddle of standardization. That is called the American system of production. Super important. And that goes back well before this period that we're talking about. And it's a really interesting process, and I invite you to read these two books about it if you want, by David Hunschel and Merritt Rose Smith, one on the system of mass production, 1800-1932, the other on the Harper's Ferry Armory, because that's really where it begins, in the armory system. It begins with the U.S. investment in massive investment, today what would be billions or trillions, in producing an interchangeable rifle at the armories, okay? And it was an expensive process that took decades and was finally finished. Finally, they get to that point. And by the way, every nation in the world have been trying to do this since the 1700s, beginning with the French. The British had tried it. And there have been different claims made that interchangeable weapons were being manufactured, but it turned out never to be true. And there was always hand filing involved, and a rifle has many parts, right? And massive advantage if you can make weaponry interchangeably. Right? And so what happens before the interchangeable Springfield rifle, you drop your weapon on the battlefield or it breaks, you have to go to a gunsmith and get it repaired. And you can't mass produce them fast in times of warfare, as the Americans found out in the War of 1812. But in any case, massive federal investment in an armory system where the feds were also intentionally contracting out parts of the process to other industries. So in order to help create an industrial consciousness in New England as they were investing so big into this. Now this is happening at two places, the Harper's Ferry Armory, and we've talked about Harper's Ferry before with John Brown and his attempted slave rebellion, this cool place between Maryland and Virginia. That's where one of the armories is, and the other is in Springfield, Massachusetts. Okay, and this shows you how the early other gun manufacturers are setting up around the armories as we get this American system of production happening. I'm probably spending too much time on this, but a big point I want to give you is, now you don't have to read these books, is that really the answer to solving interchangeability was specific purpose-built machines. Okay, purpose-built machines that do one task. First, gauges. Okay, so you can measure accurately. Accurate millimeter measurement had not happened to this point, right? Didn't exist in production. Gauges. Okay? And then it's things like lathes, okay? And then it's drills, and then it's brakes, and it's all the other machines that go into making the different parts. So specific purpose-built machines that make different components of the Springfield rifle, which then can be used in any kind of production. Okay, so what happens is the armory system and all these manufacturers like Colt and Winchester locate there, and Weed's rifles, they expand outward and make all these other things, all these other products that then America dominates in, and they can mass produce them very quickly, interchangeably in different areas. Okay? So Americans have a massive advantage in that, and you see that in a whole bunch of things. You see it, Americans, that's where you get the first affordable clock for the masses, this mantelpiece clock. Chauncey Jerome invents that with the kind of machinery that was made to make rifles, the same kind of thing, okay? And sells them for $1 a piece. By the time of the Civil War, most Americans have a clock, can afford one. And that's the thing, prices get much cheaper with the mass production as well, obviously. Isaac Singer is another example of that. He comes to America from Europe, a Jewish refugee from Europe, and he comes poor, self-made man. There's his massive factory, and through creating the first affordable sewing machine that the masses could buy. Again, using these different components that were developed, purpose-built machines that were developed in the armory system in order to create Springfield rifle. Okay, so mass manufacturing really. So this really begins in America. It's called the American System of Production, and it's called that as early as 1851. It's not by the Americans; it's by the British, and it's in the context of the Americans coming to England for the famous Crystal Palace exhibition of that year in London, and American weapons manufacturers coming in, they're exhibiting their goods at this exposition. Huge advantage. In any case, after the Civil War, you really see this. The economy is going gangbusters with Reconstruction initially, at least until the Panic of 1873, and then again it picks up in the 1880s. And now we got accelerated immigration development in the western states that are feeding into that. And you see all of that in this massive explosion in R&D, which in turn tracks with an explosion in U.S. patent filings. Now, the US is not the only place to see a growth in patents, but nowhere else is it like this. 1870 to 1900, the U.S. Patent Office issues 685,000 patents, which is more than 10 times the amount from the prior 70 years combined. And what's fascinating too is that in the decade of the 90s, it says I put it up there. It's estimated that 1/3 of these are bicycle related. Bicycle related parts are 1/3 of them. And it really shows how big that was. Outside of weaponry, bicycle is really the first mass-produced recreational good. I put enough adjectives on something, anything can mean anything, but I don't know if you think of shooting as recreational. Often it's said that the bike is the first durable good. That's not accurate. It depends how you measure durable good, lasting several years or whatever. But there has sewing machine, clocks, other items are already being manufactured, but the bicycle is massive. But here's a good example of just a partial list of all the different patents that are happening, mostly in America in this time. It shows ones all over the world, but the Americans are utterly dominating in this. Everything from the zipper to the cigarette roller. Okay, the assembly line patented, air conditioning 1902. The airplane, not incidentally, by 1903. So it just keeps building on itself. Okay, and I talked about the bicycle. The bicycle is an excellent example of what I'm talking about here. And Albert Pope is the name I want you to get today. Because nobody's more responsible for the bicycle craze of the late 1890s than he. 1869, the penny farthing is invented and also called the ordinary. Now that's a bike for basically for young men because it's super dangerous. And the higher the front wheel, the faster you're going to go, right? So the back wheel is really just for stability. Albert Pope goes to Europe. He sees these being made, comes back to America and starts mass producing them in his factory. Calls them the Columbia bicycle. Okay, but he really grows his business when he clues into the fact that the safety bicycle is where it's at. Now, this also is not invented in America. A lot of these products are not. The Americans at this time are kind of like the post-war Japanese, where it doesn't matter where a product is made. Like the locomotive was first developed in England. The Americans create the locomotive called the Tom Thumb, which could be made faster and cheaper, and they dominate the markets. Right? So that's what it is. It doesn't always have to be invented in America, but the mass production, building them faster and cheaper happens there. Okay, safety bicycle. He goes to England. Albert Pope sees that this has been invented. The small wheel geared bicycle with well, not necessarily with gears. It could be a fixie, but a chain bicycle. Okay, so the ordinary doesn't have a chain. Okay? So it's propelled on the front wheels is what propels it. So the safety bicycle is a huge leap because now anyone, and safety is because you're not falling, you're not doing a face plant on the regular and ending up you're breaking both wrists, which is the worst thing that can happen to anyone. Think about it. What has to be done for you. In any case, the safety bicycle opens the market massively. Comes back and starts building them in his factory in the States. And not only that, he really innovates the corporate structure of that becomes this uniquely American corporate system that the auto manufacturers will follow, which is create an appetite for your product, not just through marketing, but also by cultivating changes in people's habits, and specifically by sponsoring bike races. So creating a recreational habit, right? Bike races, sponsoring those, and also pushing for better roads. Okay, so lobbying Congress for better roads. The Better Roads movement comes from Albert Pope, beginning to push for. Well, it precedes him. It's farmers in the states that have been pushing for that for a while, but he gets behind that in a big way. He creates a magazine about cycling, and he sponsors clubs, cycling clubs, right? And he specifically really goes after women because that's a massive market now, that bicycles are safer and easier to get on, especially given the clothing of the time, the constraints that women had. They getting up on a bicycle was a bit of a challenge in the Victorian era. In any case, mass production is where it's at, and I'll get back to that in a second, the bloomers. But Albert Pope also develops an assembly line where the worker stands in one spot and the parts come to him. Okay, it's not Henry Ford, it's actually Albert Pope. Develops that type of assembly line with the components coming overhead, workers staying in one place. He's also the first to be targeted for that, for turning men into automatons. And the first to try and defend against that with corporate paternalism by being, by giving his workers more than he's required to. In any case, that is it becomes a massive success story for him. The bicycle, the safety bicycle, and like Henry Ford later, he will set targets of so many bicycles per hour, so many bicycles per day, and he will produce millions of them. And pretty soon he's got a lot of competitors, and with that we get the bicycle craze of the 1890s. And for a few years, everyone is buying bicycles. Okay? And it revolutionizes a lot. It's fascinating too how much is changed by the bicycle. There's real concerns initially that because nobody's ever had a personal device that they can race on, other than a horse, which gets fatigued and which is very expensive, and getting more expensive all the time, incidentally, because of stabling costs in the bigger cities. So a bicycle is really liberating, and it allows young people to travel to other villages, other towns affordably on their own. It creates concerns about dating, and for women especially, of course, at the time. It creates concerns too that people will get something called bicycle face by the wind going too rapidly against their face, and also something called pelvic mischief for women that was considered unacceptable because the seat might be arousing. Anyway, insanity. This is the Victorian era, so say no more. But it does also lead to, and this is kind of cool, this revolution in women's dress, which women have been fighting for a long time, and something called the rational dress movement, right? Amelia Bloomer had been the initiator, the big name associated with the rational dress movement, that women shouldn't have to wear these whalebone corsets that actually distort your body and are not good for your health, right? Not good for your body at all. You need your lung capacity to be riding a bike, and you also have to get on the thing, right? And without getting, now that it has a chain, without your clothes getting into that chain. So the bloomer it becomes acceptable, okay, because of the bicycle. Susan B. Anthony famously said, there has been nothing more emancipating in the history of the world than the bicycle for women. Okay? Nothing more emancipating than the invention of the bicycle for women, for equality, which is a pretty incredible statement from Susan B. Anthony. She enjoyed her bike. Enough said on that. But yeah, it's seen as threatening, but emancipating for women. Very, very cool what that does. As I said, Albert Pope, like Ford and others in the American system of production or American manufacturing, are innovating this corporate model of creating a need for your product. And the thing about mass production is it depends on mass consumption, right? Because you will overproduce, right? You can overproduce your item. Once you can perfect how to create it cheaply, 100% you're going to have a problem with surplus. So you have to create that appetite for it, right? Eventually that appetite will be satisfied by built-in obsolescence, right? And we'll talk about that when we talk about Sloanism, Fordism becoming Sloanism. GM Sloan really is the one who innovates that. But in any case, well before that, well before style changes or whatever, we do have that intensive cultivation of demand, of the demand side by Albert Pope. Okay? So fascinating thing, and I encourage you looking into that if you're interested in it. More on that. The bicycle is also a forerunner to the one product that will then dominate American industry in the 20th century and really explain America's dominance in industrialization in the 20th century, which is the automobile. Right? And basically the first vehicles are simply bicycles with engines on them, and a whole bunch of firsts in bicycles that then translate directly into cars. One being the chain and sprocket. The automobile has a timing chain, exactly the same, same make. Sheet metal is invented. Tubular steel is invented in bike production manufacturing process by Pope and others in order to make it lightweight. Pneumatic tires are invented by Dunlop in England, and then a variety of balloon tires, as they were called, are made in the States cheaply. Tension spokes. Here's Ford's quadricycle in 1896. It's a two-cylinder thing with a little rudder that you steer with, and it has no reverse. It's got two gears, but it's got literally bicycle tires on it. You use bicycle tires. Okay, ball bearings is another thing. So all these are carryovers from bikes to then cars, and again, using those purpose-built machines, America dominates in the production of automobiles. But before long, there are 50 automobile manufacturers in Detroit competing with Henry Ford and making the first cars. Now, interesting too, Pope with his Columbia bicycle branches out into making Columbia automobiles. And the first he makes are the ones that are considered winners at the time, which are electric cars. Electric cars were dominated in early America and outnumbered gasoline ones, which is fascinating too, how they, and they were considered safer and easier. No gears, right? But there was always already a problem with the weight of the battery and limited power. In any case, yeah, bikes to automobiles. And not to say that Pope or all these other companies only made one product. They could make anything, right? So a weed sewing machine went into bicycles, and different bicycle companies went into making all these other products. So it's really the origins of mass production. It doesn't matter what you produce, you're making them on the same machines that have been created through the American system of production in the armory system. Now, finally, connected with all of this, with the American system of production, we're seeing the development, the beginning of the modern American corporations, of which are really the first world's multinationals. And this is another innovation that explains U.S. economic leadership and begins in the Gilded Age. Okay, the first is Standard Oil. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, which was a whipping post, becomes Teddy Roosevelt's target and to dismantle, and he will. Followed by, after that, J.P. Morgan's U.S. Steel. Why are they novel? Well, because they're involved in this organizational revolution in how capitalism works, which then is copied all over the world. And one thing is Rockefeller eliminates all the competition to achieve horizontal and vertical integration. Okay, well, to achieve horizontal integration, I'll talk about vertical in a sec. But in any case, but it eliminates both to get there. So one way is legal, or still legal today. You buy out your competitors and you create a monopoly, right? That's a normal way of doing things even today. But then he allowed those other companies to remain quasi-independent, right? You're under the Standard Oil umbrella, but you operate as you always had. You set your own manufacturing levels, do your own selling, marketing, that kind of thing, and that's that worked very well for Standard Oil. So it also means that if you're a refinery owner competing with Standard, it's easier to accept those terms that Standard had than to fight them. But if you try to fight them, Rockefeller is ruthless, and he will price fix with small competitors. By which I mean he will lose. They will take a profit. They will take a loss in a certain market, right? Sell at a loss in order to drive somebody out in order to ruin them, right? So small competitors, Standard would sell at a loss to drive small companies under, and then inflate prices when there's no competition. Now, both those are completely illegal today. You cannot sell at a loss in a regional market in order to get rid of a competitor. In any case, through sheer size, Standard Oil avoids the cutthroat competition that really had killed the railroad companies by this time, or had really bankrupted a bunch of them. He's also into vertical integration, which is you control the oil drilling, the exploration, the drilling, the refining, the transporting, the marketing, the selling, the distribution, the whole 9 yards, right? So you've got everything. And you've gotten there too by driving those other components out of the market, right? So right, in the ways I just described. And in an era before laws against monopolies, this worked great. And it gives the advanced corporate form that we all know, the main character of which is just their sheer size, right? As well, what starts happening in the late 19th century is corporations used the Constitution to give them protection from lawsuits. And they ended up claiming that they claimed the same kind of protection that the Constitution offered in the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment we talked about before, where every person in the U.S. shall have equal protection of the laws, regardless of race. Right? Now that was obviously meant regardless of anything, right? And this was obviously meant to be limited to a racial understanding, and it's what gave the freed slaves their civil rights. That was the context. But beginning with the court decision in New Orleans in 1886, corporations were given the same rights, a corporate personhood. Okay? Yeah, and that includes the right to sue, the right to privacy, and the right to give money to political causes or parties or politicians and all the rest. So that was the New Orleans butcher's case. This is the first time this is claimed. 1886 Santa Clara versus Southern Pacific Railroad is another important trial in the corporate personhood thing. So it's a fascinating thing. And if you've seen the documentary, The Corporation, where they make the argument that the modern corporation is basically a sociopath or a psychopath, they spend a lot of time on that 14th Amendment thing. It's not a complete guarantee of anything, but it is important, right? Corporations do get protections. But they aren't protected from the progressives who will try and take them on and successfully do challenge them. And we'll talk about that in the next lecture. Okay, so that was it's supposed to be my micro lecture. It ended up being 31.5 minutes, and I kept my camera on the whole time. Didn't even notice that. But hopefully that helped, and hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of where we're at in this unit, in this week, talking about Gilded Age industrialization. All right, a bit of the context, historicizing it for you. And yeah, hopefully that helped. Any questions, let me know. Cheers.